chambers of the moral heart are subject to the will, I would say. The intellect empowers the will to make informed decisions, but the attention of the intellect is turned by the will. So if someone is speaking to you and they're speaking to you in truth, if you don't want to hear the truth, you may leave the room. If you don't want to understand the truth, you may change the conversation. Either way, it's the truth. It's been presented to you. You can digest it. You could throw it up. You could keep it. You could give it away. You could not want it. It's up to you. That's your will. So the other chambers of the moral heart are subject to the will. The intellect empowers the will to make informed decisions, but the attention of the intellect is turned by the will. Once again, the intellect empowers the will to make informed decisions, but the attention of the intellect is turned by the will. And then you have to consider your conscience. You consider your conscience because if you're a person that really doesn't care about a certain situation, then your conscience says, oh, well, I'll make it without that truth. And then your will makes an uninformed decision. It turns out to be the wrong decision, maybe the right decision. Maybe it's been the right decision the last 3 times in a row. That doesn't mean that it's right. It means that your conscience has made a decision that it was right and it goes on with it. Doesn't mean that it's right. A man decides with what to fill his intellect like he does his belly. By a pattern of choices, he develops habits of thought. And having understood a truth, he decides what to do about it. So when you develop that pattern, oh, the last 3 times it worked, so it should work this time. But what if it doesn't? It must have not been the truth. It's the development of habits, of thoughts, the way you think. Just because the mailman came at 3 yesterday doesn't mean he'll be there at 3 tomorrow. If he comes for the next 3 days at 3, doesn't mean the 4th day he'll be there at 3. That's not the case. But if you think that way, you could possibly be disappointed. It's not considered truth. It's just your thinking. While the will must push the intellect, it must restrain the emotion. And this is very key. Let me read that again. While the will must push the intellect, it must restrain the emotion. Once again, the will is the executive chamber. So while your will must push your intellect, must push the thing that you know. Now, wait a minute. I know I put $30 in gas in my car yesterday. Why am I having no gas in my vehicle? Emotionally, you have to control yourself. Something's going on. Maybe I need a tune-up. Maybe I need an oil change. Maybe my tires are too flat. Maybe my engine is going out. Maybe one of my heads just went out. Anything. Emotionally, you have to control yourself. The will has to control the intellect. It has to tell it. Now, if you just put that gas in there and you only went to point A and point B, then I should have this much gas. Why don't I have this much gas? Now, some people would automatically say, someone must be stealing my gas. I'm mad. That's the emotion. But if you think about it, you think about the maintenance of your vehicle, or you think the thoughts about your vehicle, there might be another problem. There could be another issue, and your will has to control that thought. So The emotions tug at the will like a horse at the reins, but the will is in the saddle and tames the heart or the emotion by turning the head or the intellect this way and that way. So if you look at it in the sense of a horse, the emotion tugs at the will like a horse at the reins. So the horse is moving. You're sitting on the horse, grabbing the reins. The will is the saddle that you're sitting on that tames everything. Once you're sitting in the saddle and you have the reins, the will is the saddle and it tames the hearts or the emotions. It turns the head or the intellect this way and that. But the emotions is that big horse ready to just take off running. But there you are with your will holding the reins. I hope that's a good picture. In fact, we sometimes say to the impatient, hold your horses. The conscience lobbies the executive chamber, the will of the will to act in accordance with justice. The conscience lobbies the executive chamber, which is the will of the will, to act in accord with justice, or whatever you consider your justice. Once again, we spoke of the conscience, we spoke of the intellect. That's why they're all combined. If your conscience says, this guy's wearing red and I'm in a hood that wears blue, instantly your intellect tells you it's time to protect my hood. It's time to protect this area, this street, because it belongs to me. Understood? So now, what do you do to protect? Is it easy for you to pull out your 9mm and shoot him in the face? It all depends on where your conscience is. It all depends on where your intellect is. It all depends on where your emotions are. But ultimately, if you feed those things correctly, if you feed your intellect correct, your intellect says, well, if I shoot him right now in the face in broad daylight, I could get caught and do life in prison. Intellectually, you could think, conscious-wise, you could think, maybe this has a mother, maybe this individual has children, maybe this individual is not even a gangbanger and he's only wearing red because he doesn't know. Maybe he's in this neighborhood because he doesn't know. Your conscience goes through all of that. If he's got on a red shirt with a black tie, it's different than if he has on a red shirt that says the name of his hood, if he's a blood. So intellectually, consciously, emotionally, all that is happening all at one time. Your conscience, first you have your intellect. Your intellect says, oh, well, it's just a dress shirt, but it is red. That's disrespecting my hood. But he looks like a businessman. Maybe he's there to sell the house next door. Consciously, emotionally, you come next. If you've already tamed that emotion to think intellectually, well, he doesn't look like a gangbanger, so why would I do that to him? That could be the case. Or you could not have a conscience and you could say, I don't care what it is. He's in my hood. He got on the wrong color. I don't have a conscience that cares. I'm going to shoot him anyway. Boom. So you have to feed your intellect the right thing. A man decides with what to fill his intellect like he does his belly. By an act of will, man applies the intellect to the training of his conscience, and so chooses his counselors like a president chooses his cabinet. Let me read that again. By an act of will, man applies the intellect to the training of his conscience, and so chooses his counselors like a president chooses his cabinet. He can fill it with flatterers who always applaud him, or fill it with wise advisors who censor him with necessary conclusions. The physical heart is a thing of wonder, but the moral heart is even more so. So I would invite you to start off by feeding your intellect. Feed your intellect the truth, whatever truth you can find. Understand your emotion and where it sits in your moral heart. Understand your conscience and where it sits in your moral heart. And understand that the will is the executive chamber, and it always takes precedence over those other three chambers. Thank you for watching. This is only our first lesson. We will continue. We have lots more. Have a good day.